I'm sure for many, releases of new shmups might not draw massive interest. Having been such a major part of gaming's history, I'm sure to thought that if you've seen one, that maybe you've seen them all, runs through the heads of many. But the thing is, that isn't really the case at all, as even in space year 2021, we're still seeing creators working on new shmups which don't just crib from the past, but aim to bring something new to the table. Which brings us to Soul Force. The setup is much as you'd expect for a shooter. It's the far distant future, and the people of the Soltron system have lived in peace for millennia. But even as peace reigns, there are some looking to the stars wondering what lies beyond their system. Wanting to be prepared for the worst, they instigate Project Soul Force, a secret project resulting in the development of a highly capable starfighter. Sadly, their worst fears have come true in the form of a giant biomechanical fleet which has entered the Soltron system, making its way to many of its planets and burrowing deep into their surfaces. With attempts at peaceful communication falling silent, there's one option left. Launch the Soul Force on a mission to find out what this fleet wants and put a stop to whatever scheme is being hatched. As always, it's you who'll be in the pilot seat for this highly dangerous mission. Prior to each stage, you'll be introduced to the next part through a conversation between yourself and your commanding officer. Combined with the image which sets the tone of the stage ahead, it well and truly sets Soul Force apart from many of the other shooters released for 8-bit micros, both those from back in the day, but also some of the more modern releases out there. But then it's time to jump into the mission itself, which is done in a flash thanks to Soul Force being designed first and foremost as a Commodore 64 cartridge release, freeing players from the joys of waiting for the 1541 to whir away. Or worse, dealing with the horrors and the waiting of loading from cassette. Once the stage kicks in, you'll find at first glance Soul Force might be a traditional horizontally scrolling shooter. You'll navigate the game's 20 levels, blasting enemies, avoiding hazards, and yes, collecting power-ups before reaching the end of each stage to tackle the boss and moving on to the next. Where it shines is with its impressive technical execution, with levels featuring lots of parallax scrolling and a very tightly coded sprite multiplexer, allowing plenty of enemy threats on screen without flicker, slowdown, or any other impediments to the action. The amount of objects being thrown about makes for a serious step above Neutron or Zetaing, coder Sarah Jane Avery's previous titles, and is no doubt helped also by the choice to use characters as bullets over the sprites, something you won't necessarily notice thanks to the frantic pace of everything on screen. Technical proficiency is one thing, but what's more important to making a game shine are its mechanics, and for shooters, one of the most critical is the power-up system. For me, the execution of this is something which can make or break a game in my eyes. It's why I've never really been able to enjoy games like Delta, in which progression requires you to have a specific set of power-ups equipped at particular stages. If you don't, then it's a guaranteed failure. Another one I don't enjoy is Armalite, which, whilst offering a fairly deep system at first glance, requires extensive faffing about to activate many of the higher level options the game has. Getting your fighter powered up and armed to the teeth and ready to cut through hordes of enemy forces is just far too much work. But more importantly, having to engage with the system in this way to upgrade is enough for me to be dragged out of that state of flow, which is a big factor of why I enjoy playing shooters, getting into the flow, the zone, and just being able to run on instinct, cutting my way through the enemies. Soul Force's power-up system is a refreshing contrast to the systems of those games, being easy to collect, straightforward to manage, and absolutely will not drag you out of that flow state in order to get your ship upgraded and keep you fighting fit against those enemies. As you journey through each stage, you'll encounter power-up carrier craft. When blasted, they'll drop a power-up to collect. Pickups cover both defensive and offensive options. The defensive ones give you shields or temporary invulnerability to enemy weapons fire. On an offensive front, these primarily serve as your ship's weapons, whether you're carrying plasma shots, multi-shots, laser cannons, or even the energy wave. All of them are quite handy for taking out those enemy forces. There's also one extra one, the smart bomb, which clears the screen of enemies in a flash. If you happen to collect the same power-up as that of your current weapon, it'll boost its attack power. And conversely, if you happen to be destroyed in battle, your current weapon will be reduced in power. An important tactic for mastering Soul Force requires you to not just rely on that single weapon. So, if you do lose a few lives and have a favourite weakened, you won't be totally powerless as you would be in other games, because you can switch to one of those other weapons, which hopefully still is powered up and still keeps your attack effectiveness pretty high. Another mechanic which elevates Soul Force is its scoring, something, once again, which many shmups on the 8-bits don't really focus on. Taking out enemies is important, of course, but even more so is focusing on a single wave as it comes on screen. If you can defeat all of the enemies in that wave, you're given an extra 500 points as a reward. It doesn't sound like much, but with extra lives being earned at every 50,000 points, anything to help you bridge that gap quickly will always be ever so helpful. Then, it's time to confront one of the end of stage bosses. These confrontations may not involve the hectic, bullet-infested challenges you'll find in more modern shmups, but what I love about them is the increasing complexity which they'll demonstrate as you progress further into the game. With the earlier stages, all you'll need to do is locate and destroy a lone weak spot in order to successfully vanquish them. Later on though, things are far more complex, as you'll now need to destroy multiple parts of the boss before the core becomes vulnerable to your attacks. Watching them explode into a million pieces makes for a satisfying end to the stage, as you're rewarded for a job well done with the customary end of stage wrap up. Not only do you receive a hearty bonus for taking out the boss, but you're also treated to the last major rabbit Soul Force pulls out of its hat, saving your progress. Playing from the physical cartridge allows you to save to its internal memory, which is the most convenient way to manage this. For those who've picked up the digital download, the most common way involves writing a save game to disk, so dust off the 1541 and make sure to have a spare disk handy. The final option is to write down the passwords displayed on screen. It's the most old school of the methods for sure, but the easiest to share with your friends, in case one of them needs a little bit of a helping hand. No matter the method you use, it's one of those features which helps make Soul Force a most excellent shmup experience, no matter if you're a hardened shmup fan or one just looking to learn the ways. One of the coincidental benefits of a system like this is for training purposes. Mastering a shmup can be repetitive at times, as you'll focus on playing each level one at a time, aiming to survive with as few lives lost as possible. Being able to save after you've mastered a stage makes for a great way to chart your progress whilst you're trying to learn it. Or it can just be a handy way to save progress if you need to take a break after an intense session of play. It also serves to champion one of the major positives of modern game design, the idea that one's progress is valuable and should be kept even if you've been defeated. Whilst there are creators and players out there who do prefer those trappings of nostalgia and the games which throw back to earlier times, for me it's far more exciting to watch creators take the lessons learned in modern times, but apply them to games for vintage systems like this. If there was any one facet to Soul Force I most appreciate, this is it. Taking a well-loved genre and building upon it to create a title which offers a challenge, yet is fair to the player, and most importantly doesn't waste the player's time, is not an easy thing to do. The result makes for a shooter which feels quite fresh to play, especially as it doesn't try to offer the gimmicks which many other shooters have attempted over the Commodore 64's lifetime. No matter how you choose to play it, whether you decide to order the physical cartridge or perhaps simply stick with the download, Soul Force is a game I feel has plenty to get excited about, especially if you're a shooter fan and, more than anything, serves as a most exciting opener for the Commodore 64 in space year 2021.